I mean, that's really the issue, and this is something that happens every time there is a ceasefire, or frequently when there is a ceasefire, there are violations of it. And the question is then, at what point do you say, okay, the ceasefire has essentially collapsed and no longer applies? What we gather so far is that we have not drifted into that territory. The U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said today that rocket attacks went from hundreds to basically zero, and then dozens of airstrikes by Israel to one or two per day. So what they're saying here is there has been a dramatic reduction in violence, and that's what matters, and the ceasefire still holds. But what it does tell us more broadly is that this is very tenuous. You had President Biden come out and say that the ceasefire had been achieved, a lot of concern about whether it will hold, and concern that things will only continue to escalate. One possibility, of course, is this is just sort of a show of strength by the two sides. Things will quiet back down, but certainly not looking good for the broader prospects for that ceasefire at the moment.
Nick, why this dance? Rather than ceasefire means ceasefire. So help me understand. I know that it's always complicated when I feel like anything in the Middle East, but why this dance rather than, okay, ceasefire, this is a step forward?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, but the big issue is that so much time and effort and energy went into establishing this ceasefire, and the really important thing for certainly the U.S., but also for those caught in the conflict, is that the violence has dramatically reduced. So there's a question of, okay, you have the ceasefire, you don't want to immediately just declare the ceasefire is dead, which means, okay, that everybody would then have to go back to the negotiating table. And if you're looking at a pure numbers game, it's like, okay, well, we have a monitoring system in place. There may be some violations. We do not deem those violations to indicate that the ceasefire has totally collapsed. I mean, and when you look at some of the language, it seems like the two sides also have an interest in keeping the ceasefire in place. Hezbollah, for example, targeted Israel in a specific area, an area that's still contested, and they framed their response as a defensive response to what they said were recurrent violations by the Israeli side. So what they're saying is this is much more of a defensive action, and they have not gone back on the offensive. Of course, big question is whether Israel will see things the same way. But at this point, the big question is going to be, is there escalation where we would get to a point where we would say, listen, the ceasefire exists in name only? So far, that's not quite yet the case.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the area that's in contention right now, Nick, because we saw after that ceasefire deal was signed last week, or reached last week, I should say, we saw people moving in Lebanon, moving back to that area because they thought it would be safe to do so. So there's some concerns there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of the imagery we really saw of people coming back to their homes in Lebanon, in a lot of cases, that was actually in Beirut, in the capital, where people had fled because Israeli airstrikes had really hit some parts of Beirut, particularly southern Beirut, quite hard. And so people were coming back in because there was a feeling, which has largely held, that the ceasefire would apply and you wouldn't start to see those strikes again. The area really in question is this sort of strip of land around just south of the Litani River. And so this divides Lebanon and Israel. And this has been a sort of hotly contested area for quite some time. And it's believed that Hezbollah, has been there for a long time. And there was a feeling that Israel could then pull back, and that would also allow Hezbollah to pull back. So that's really where you're seeing a lot of the contested, the violations. We have not seen major violations apply, to Beirut, which I think if you did see that would indicate a real collapse of the ceasefire.